Hello, students of American Experience. This is Mr. Garrity. I'm coming to you with a screencastify related to our lesson on Sandra Cisneros' only daughter. So if you look on the document here at the top, I want you to write your MLA heading at the top of the document. You remember you have your name, you have my name, you have the course, which is American Experience, and I also want you to have the date in the format that we discussed in terms of creating an MLA heading. So one of the things you want to do is consider the essential questions for the text. So here are the essential questions if you scroll down with me. How do children create their own sense of self despite the expectations of their parents? Another one is, how does Cisneros oppose the predetermined adult life her father, brothers, and family seem to have created for her? Another one is, what is Cisneros trying to accomplish by becoming a self-reliant author and woman? How do families and cultures shift or change from one generation to the next? So as we read the text, you're going to be looking at the word only, right? We talked about this when we did TP cast, when we start with title and reacting to title on a literal level and then on a more symbolic level. But the guidance that I want you to give you is pay attention to the word only. In the word only, and there's a quote, it says, I am the only daughter of an only daughter. Am the only daughter and only a daughter. There's an adverb, which is modifying the verb to be, meaning she is only a daughter. And then there's the adjective describing the noun daughter, an only daughter, meaning one daughter. I want you to think about, as you read, what's the difference between the use of the word only, and how does that relate to the differences in uses of tone and theme? So, what is the difference between each word only? That's a question for you. The root of the word only is the word one. In Spanish, the word sola means alone, and it is the root of the word solamente, which means only. Also, I want you to pay attention to where Cisneros italicizes words in order to emphasize the shifting tone of the essay. What is Cisneros emphasizing when she uses italics on certain words? Okay, so what we've just talked about are close reading skills. So you're going to survey the text. You're going to go over the essential questions that I just gave you and think about the title. And then as you read, or once you've completed reading, I want you to ask one convergent question. A convergent question means a comprehension question. Here's an example. What type of writing is Only Daughter? Well, it's creative nonfiction. It's a personal essay. You can ask a question that's text related that can be answered by reading. Could be, how many brothers and sisters does Cisneros have in this essay? What's her relationship to her father in terms of him being an immigrant, a Mexican American, a Mexican immigrant? And how does that relate to her? Where do they live in the story? Those are questions that you can ask that are convergent. There are answers to them. Then I want you to ask at least one divergent question. And it's a question that asks the reader, you, the reader, to interpret what the text is suggesting. So, couple that I ask. Why does Cisneros want people to read? Why does she want to woo, she uses the word woo, non-readers? And then I want you to write your divergent questions on this worksheet. And now we're going to move into what's called the SIFT protocol for analysis. Like we use TPCast were those steps to look at poetry. The SIFT method is a way to look at literature and to analyze for theme and to analyze tone and symbols to get to theme. So on S, what's symbolic? Examine the title and the text for anything that is symbolic. You can use a sentence starter on a symbolic level and then fill in the title or other elements of the story that you think are symbolic or have some meaning other than the very literal. Where are there images from the story that have sensory details? This is language that relates to the five senses. Then I want you to look at figures of speech, analyze figurative language and other devices. We did this when we talked about poetry as well. Think of metaphor, simile, connotative word choice. Maybe the word embroider, maestra versus profesora, which is in Spanish, which you might have a question about. How does she use dialogue and create conflict within her essay? And then tone and theme. Discuss how the language reveals tone and theme. What's the father's tone in the story? The brother's tone in the story? Cisneros' tone, right? And then there are several concepts or ideas that can be created into theme statements. Ideas and concepts such as family, predetermination, gender roles, generational conflict from one generation to the next, and there are others that you can determine on your own. And then I'm going to give you some theme statements because ultimately you're writing a theme statement. Here are some examples or exemplars. Essentially, Sandra Cisneros suggests writing and self-expression were effective tools for a Latina and Chicana American to gain acceptance from an immigrant and Mexican father who is steeped in cultural traditions and gender roles. Ultimately, Only Daughter by Sandra Cisneros illustrates personal struggles individuals can face and ultimately overcome when engaged in generational conflict. Cisneros faced and overcame the predetermined, gender-specific path laid out by her father and family as a child and young adult by emphasizing a moment when her voice was finally heard by her father, who had treated her as a quote-unquote other within her own family. Cisneros suggests various minorities and oppressed groups will continue to experience victimization and humiliation generation after generation unless individuals become more resilient, self-reliant, and boldly expressive of their own views and opinions. This is where I want you to write your own theme statement. Take an idea about maybe being a young woman, being an immigrant in the United States, the relationship between daughters and fathers, the relationships between families as they work, especially immigrant families as they are integrated or they are part of the American experience. What is it like for them? You can come up with ideas, and I'd like you to offer your theme statement of what you think Cisneros is working toward. And if you look here, there's a rubric, and I give you 4 levels of a rubric for a theme statement. Excellent being a clear, declarative sentence that's sharply focused and acknowledges the complexity of the issue and asserts a position on it. It's well written, interesting, and thought-provoking. And then obvious and simple is at the lowest level, an idea that doesn't really require development and proof, thus not a thesis. So you don't want to ask a question that's just a comprehension question or something like a convergent question that we discussed above. So I'd like you to go through all of this and then send to me your reactions, your notes that you're taking on this document, and then your thesis statement, which then I'm going to assess. And then finally, and I know we did this in our synchronous time together, but if you haven't, please respond to my teacher feedback form, which will tell me how you're doing with this. How do you feel about it? What can I change as a teacher? I know e-learning is something that we're back into at the beginning of the year, and I want to make sure you're feeling comfortable and that I'm meeting your needs as a teacher. So I wish you the best, and please send me any feedback, and I look forward to reading your theme statements. Be well.